Welcome everyone to another episode of the Teaching Edge podcast. Today with me is Ross Garrod, the founder and CEO of Practice Pal, a very unique platform for helping music teachers in schools and for students learning music to practice better. When I was young, music played a big part in my life, and I know that getting students motivated and excited about lessons and practice, as well as the music teachers themselves, is of great importance, and Practice Pal is using tech for these purposes and more. Welcome, Ross, to the Teaching Edge podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me.
That's a great opportunity. Actually, I love speaking to people about music, and I don't get a lot of chances to speak about how technology works with music and with music teachers. So this is very, very unique. Thank you for being here. And let's maybe start by talking about how music is taught around the world. You are based in the UK and work a lot in schools in the UK, but obviously you know a lot about how music is taught around the world and the main challenges that music teachers face. So that would be a good starting point, to understand the world of the music teacher.
Yes, absolutely. The world of a music teacher is a unique individual, slightly strange at times. It's definitely different to what you might think of when you say music teacher. You might think of the teacher that you had in class who would stand at the front and teach you about dynamics and the history of music, whatever it might be, or maybe it was a choir if you were fortunate enough. But actually, often what we're talking about, what I'm talking about with Practice Pal, is about instrumental music teachers. So those music teachers who kind of go alongside the music departments, get alongside schools and teach instrumental music by within the school day, where they're generally taking children out of academic lessons, maybe teaching them one-to-one or one to small group, and they're doing that part of the kind of music education. Now, it is completely unique because it's a school within a school. So the music department, it's almost its own entity within a school, which is often kind of, it's not really seen, it's not visible in the same way as the other academic subjects. But actually, in a lot of schools, the number of music lessons happening each week is greater than the number of academic lessons happening each week. So this is really, really active. You know, if you think about a school of maybe 1,000 children or something like that, you'll probably have maybe 150 of those having a lesson a week, maybe 200. So you're having 150 to 200 lessons a week, which are happening alongside the academic timetable. Now, that is a timetabling nightmare unless you're going to be taking them out of the same lesson every week. And as soon as you start to factor in other activities that happen at school, so, you know, school trips, exams, tests, whatever it is, it just becomes very, very difficult. Plus, you're kind of outside of that sphere, so communication with other teachers, with parents, with students is more complex as well. Now, you mentioned the kind of difference between UK and the kind of global way of teaching instrumental music, and there's kind of broadly two main camps. So you have kind of the American model, which is the band system. So you kind of, if you think of those American teen dramas, you often have the people who are in the band. And that's different to kind of the British, which I don't want to say it's kind of the orchestral model, because it's not really so much about that. It's more, if you like, the kind of individual aspect of it. So you teach much more in groups. It's often kind of timetabled into the curriculum or into the school day or after school, whatever it is. Whereas in the UK, it's this kind of running alongside everything else that a child is doing.
Yeah, and you have background as a musical instrument teacher yourself, and you have and you've been in touch with obviously many music teachers with what you do. So what is
Absolutely.
this main challenge for them? What happens in a typical day for someone, before a meeting Practice Pal?
before meeting Practice Pal, so you will have spent far too long trying to look through the school calendar, look through the schedule, work out the different timetables for all your different students. I think of when I was teaching at prep school in London, I had 22 students. Each year group has a different timetable. Some of those timetables change term to term. There's subjects you're not allowed to take them out of. You need to make sure they haven't missed the same subjects each week. You've got the school calendar. You've got extra restrictions like the sports events which are happening. You've got the school trips. You've got the ones who are away for dentist appointments, etc., etc. Now, so the day kind of like, if you like, starts with working out when on earth you're going to be able to teach all of these children when they're actually going to be in school and available for a lesson. So you might spend, I don't know, half an hour to an hour per day of your teaching, just trying to work out where to be teaching them. Then you'll go into school and you will find that your students do not remember when their music lessons are, despite it being on the notice board or whatever else. And so you go and fetch them, and the academic teacher goes, "Oh, no, you've come to take them. Do you have to take them out of this lesson? We're going to do a really fun thing." And then the child's like, "Oh, no, but I don't know if I want to go to this lesson now that the teacher doesn't want me to leave." Anyway, so then you have to kind of negotiate their exit. You finally get them back to the teaching room. You've lost maybe 10 minutes of the lesson time by this point. You get going with the student, and you quickly realize that they haven't actually thought about their musical instruments since the last week. So you reteach the lesson that you taught them last week, and you try and make a tiny bit of progress. And then you quickly try and write down some notes to send to their parents, email to their parents later on or something like that, so that they can try and help them practice at home and make sure that you don't have to reteach them again the next week. And then you go through the same thing with the next student who doesn't remember that it's their music lesson, and then you go and fetch them. And then you find out that there's something that didn't make it onto the school calendar or didn't get copied into you with an email, and you find out that that's actually scuppered maybe 5 lessons of your day. So you try and rearrange those lessons, because if you don't manage to rearrange those lessons, you're not going to get paid for those lessons. So you need to rearrange those lessons because you want to get paid. You want them to have their lesson that week. You don't want them to be having another week where they don't make progress. And then you go and fetch them at the times that they didn't know they should be coming because they didn't even get a chance to look on the notice board. So I hope I'm painting for you a picture of chaos, I think, because it is very much managing chaos. And music teachers do an incredible job, actually, on the whole, in managing that chaos to an extent that the school just thinks of them as being slightly disorganized and doesn't realize that they're actually on the whole, they're pretty incredibly organized. It's just that the scale of what they're trying to coordinate and organize is so far beyond what is normal for other teachers.
Yeah, and I would expect for teachers who are listening to us who are not musical instrument teachers, they see it from the other side, lessons being interrupted, and maybe absolutely. They are very happy for the student to be learning their instrument, but not as happy as stopping the lesson and rearranging things around that. And I can imagine it can become very, very frustrating. And I think also it's a very it's a missed opportunity for everyone involved, and especially with the kind of impact that music has in the student's life, which we'll talk about a bit later. But let's talk about I know you arrived at your current solution with Practice Pal coming from a different place, and I'd love for us to talk about that. But specifically for these kinds of challenges, what happens when they, and discover what they can do with the Practice Pal? What happens then?
Well, one of the things that you pointed out is, that actually academic teachers on the whole are pretty positive about instrumental music education. They just don't like finding out about it 2 seconds before a child is meant to be leaving their lesson. And so, it's hard to kind of encompass the whole of what Practice Pal, the kind of management solution for music departments does, but it kind of highlighting a couple of features might help illustrate the point. So, there's a feature, for example, where we can match up automatically the teaching timetables of the music lessons with their academic lessons and find which teachers are going to be affected. And we ping them an email in the morning and say, these children are going to be leaving your lessons today. These are the times they're going to be leaving. So
they know well in advance.
Academic teachers, exactly. Yeah. They can plan around it. And you know, what we've really seen from the schools using PracticePal is it's almost like this thing has operated as a relationship counselor between this broken relationship between the instrumental music teacher and the academic music teacher. Now that there's that communication which is happening between them, which wouldn't be possible without the automations. They're actually, you know, they're best of friends now. You know, it's repairing the relationships. So I guess that's kind of one thing. But I'm trying to remember what your kind of question was. It was about
exactly that. What do they find when they start using? So first, you say the academic teacher is notified in advance because the systems are matched. So what do? Do you connect to the actual school system?
Yeah, we integrate directly with the management information system that schools use. So we integrate with about 36 MIS systems, I think. And that's how a lot of this kind of automation can happen.
So you really did individual integrations with many MIS systems that you can...
No, individual would be that's not quite accurate. We use the Wand API, and then we have a few kind of specific things that we've had to vary for different MIS systems.
Okay.
So there's even when you're using if you like a kind of conduit, the third party, there's a surprising number of differences between the different MIS by the time you get the data, but. I mean, actually, we did a survey recently of our teachers, and there were a few things that had really clearly changed. One was student punctuality, so not having to fetch the children in the first place because they're getting the automatic notifications telling them when their lesson's going to be. Their parents are getting those notifications as well. Plus, if they've got PracticePal installed on their mobile phone or their device or whatever, they're getting a push notification telling them now is the time to go to your music lesson. Off you go, you know, toddle along. And that actually works, which is great. So punctuality was scored really highly on what had changed. And I thought it was interesting. We also just asked, has it made you enjoy teaching more? I mean, the other obvious one is scheduling. So massive reduction in scheduling time, because we've basically taken it from around where it had been, sort of half an hour per day per week of teaching would be your scheduling. We've got that down to about 30 to 60 seconds per day per week. Wow. So a huge reduction in the scheduling. But then just asking the question, how has this changed your pleasure in teaching? Has it affected it? Or has it not made any difference at all? And it was really interesting to see just how many teachers said, actually, this has changed it for the better. Admittedly, we had one who said, this has changed it for the worst, and I would like PracticePal to vanish. But you know, that I can accept one who just hates what we're doing. I think maybe they hated technology. But I actually, it raises a different point, and I wouldn't want to say that this was where the teacher was coming from. But one of the things that I was really keen for was for there to be accountability in the quality of teaching that is being provided, because it sits outside of the kind of curriculum time, the academic schedule. It doesn't have the same oversight or accountability. So it's really hard to know what's going on week to week and what's the quality like. Are students making progress? Things like that. So with PracticePal, it brings that accountability and oversight, which means that senior leaders and your music department lead know exactly what is going on. And we've actually had it from one school where they've said, okay, we have actually discovered that one of our teachers was basically not teaching, and we've now had to dismiss them. And we've brought in another teacher, and that instrument is flourishing
Yeah.
In the school. So it is something that there will be some people, who don't like it, because we are bringing oversight and accountability to instrumental music in schools.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And what about you mentioned that the teacher would have the student come in unprepared, didn't remember what had been done in the previous lesson. How has that changed?
Yeah, so I was really keen not to have to reteach my pupils. So I was like, okay,
Yeah.
well, how can we make this so that I don't have to reteach the same lesson? How can I make something that is actually helpful for my students? And there's a few things. Right from the kind of the basics which was just there's this traditional thing that we use, which is the practice notebook, the practice diary, whatever you want to call it. And
Yeah.
it tends to be a thing with lined paper on one side and manuscript on the other side. Loads of schools have them. And this basically is an ongoing battle for whether you can get this book to get from the teacher to home and back again, and to convey the information in those directions. So, but the basic thing that we do is that in lessons, you've got, if you like, a digital practice book. So you've got the place where you're putting your notes, you can upload media, take photos, but you can also record safeguarded video clips. And that is really cool, because then you can either get the child to be recording the things that you've been working on, playing the bars they've learnt the new rhythms to, things like that, or you can record demos yourself, which means that when they're practicing, they've got access to that from the app. They can see your notes, they can see the videos that you've uploaded, so they can make sure that they are practicing the right rhythms with the right dynamics or whatever it is that you're working at with them. But then even further than that, what we've done is pretty cool. It's pretty exciting. So we've made the first virtual practice corridor. So students can, and I tested this out on my students first. I mean, that was actually how PracticePal came to be. And some of the parents of those students then went on to be our initial investors, the people who put money into PracticePal and said, look, go for it. You've got to make this a company because this is crazy. And so with this virtual practice corridor, what we've done is we've made it so that multiple students can check in at the same time from their devices, and you can have a practice mentor or a practice guide, whatever you want to call them, and that guide can hear those students kind of audially spaced. I don't know what word I should be using there, but as in, like, you can kind of hear them from left to right.
So the students
in
have
your
the
headphones.
so the students have your app turned on, listening to what they do.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. So they pop their phone on the music stand, so the mentor can see and hear what they're doing, but they can't hear the other students or see the other students, things like that. So it's kind of like a personal trainer, but for music practice, or if you think of live chat support, if you've ever had that, where you've got someone who's kind of helping you through, the guide kind of acts in that way, sending messages, encouraging where it's going well, helping you spot the bits to work on. And this concept is really kind of stolen from specialist music schools, where they have full-time employees, generally sort of gap year students, or just after graduate, just early graduate students who spend a year being a practice supervisor. And so they'll wander the corridors, making sure everyone's doing their music practice, and
an actual corridor,
the children,
not a virtual corridor, but an actual
corridor, with lots of different practice rooms. So basically, we thought, well, look, that works for specialist music schools. Why don't we steal that idea, but then try and do it better? So we can actually make it so that you can really hear all the students. We can make it so that you can give them feedback and encouragement and smiley faces and emojis that can help them get the kind of dopamine hit of excitement as they're practicing. Because I found practice hard as a child. I found it very hard. I often my best practice was actually when my mum was supervising my practice and encouraging me to play. So I definitely felt a lot of sympathy for my students, and thought, we've got to find a way to make this work. And I'm quite excited that that's one of the aspects that we're pushing more in terms of development over the next 6 months. And so we're going to start leaning into the gamification elements of that. And it feeds, and then all of the kind of practice tracking and experience and progress feeds back into what the teacher sees week to week.
Yeah, so that's very significant, because it's way more than just helping the teacher's schedule and arrive in time. Well, obviously, that's a huge leap. Suddenly, they are easily dismissed for their lesson, and the lesson is longer and it's more focused. But you actually have teaching tools within what you've developed for the lesson itself, and for something that the child can take home with him or her. And then additionally, if they want to use this also as a supervised practice tool, that adds even more. So it's going beyond the scheduling itself and helping the music teacher. It's actually helping the student learn better.
The way we've tended, well, the way we started out by always kind of describing PracticePal was as an ecosystem. So this idea that actually it's where all the different roles involved in music education flourish together symbiotically. So, you've got your parents, you've got your students, teachers, schools, multi-academy trusts, school networks, groups, all of those kind of different roles live within the ecosystem. And we've made the platform that links them all together. And that means that for each role, what basically, we can remove a lot of the faff, improve the communication and the effectiveness of what is being done. And that's really cool. I mean, actually, we then started not to call it an ecosystem because in some ways we weren't developed enough for people to understand that has been the vision. And it's almost like we need to kind of start bringing it back, because we're kind of getting to the point where you look at it and you go, oh, okay, I get it now. Yes, that's how the ecosystem hangs together.
Yeah. Well, I could call it a musical education platform. Just, maybe it doesn't sound
ecosystem is still too grand. Okay, we'll go with platform. Sure,
but it really, you do connect. You do connect everyone together. And do you find do you find that sometimes the music teachers are also these practice supervisors, or are these two separate roles usually?
So they're two separate roles. So to become like a really good practice supervisor, mentor on our platform does take training, and it does take real skill. Now, so those supervisors and mentors are all they're in-house trained. So we have 20 at the moment. And they not only go through a rigorous, I don't want to call it examination sort of process, but it's more a kind of rigorous interview process, if you like, where for example, they kind of sit a test, and they're tested on lots of different things. The wildest you can get of kind of notation and music theory alongside their musical understanding, etc., because our mentors are actually supervising multiple different instruments simultaneously. So we need them not only to be really good musicians in their own particular instrument, their kind of strongest instrument. We need them to understand the basic practicalities of kind of how technique applies to all the different families of musical instruments. And at least for example, like on the test that we set them to begin with, one of the things that we say kind of at the beginning is basically remember that you do have Google, you have internet, because what we're really testing is how well do you understand? Do you understand well enough that you can figure out the answers in real time? So it's a very time pressured test, because when you're mentoring students, like I had early on, I was when we had a kind of minimum viable product of our practice corridor, I was supervising a trumpeter, and I don't play trumpet, I don't play any brass instruments, and she asked me what the fingering was for one of the notes that she was practicing. And so I needed to know, to understand enough to be able to very quickly work out what the fingering was for the note, check whether I'd missed anything in terms of transposition, because obviously trumpet is written in B flat, and I wanted to make sure that I wasn't accidentally reading the wrong clef, and et cetera, and give her the fingering. And that's what that kind of adaptability, that ability to support the practice. It's kind of different to teaching. Now with teaching, you've got loads of responsibility for technique, for the way the student is going to be developing the material they look at, when you introduce all the different material, et cetera. The practice mentor is just there to help you rehearse what your teacher has said or done or set you. And so different skills, different roles. But coming back to your initial question, and I realize I've rambled a little bit, but yes, we actually have quite a few teachers who say, I'm really enjoying using PracticePal for my teaching, and I'm interested in the guided practice element. Do you have any vacancies? Can we become practice mentors? And that's great. I love those messages.
Okay, that's great. So from the parent point of view, if I look at this as a parent, I may be seeing my child practicing or getting lessons at school. I understand that they are using PracticePal. I can see the app being used, and then suddenly I see this additional option if I want my child to practice more or better or more accurately at home, which is really what makes progress. Now about go ahead.
I was just going to say, and the results of the difference in progress have been quite staggering in what we've seen. So it seems to be pretty standard now that the students we're seeing make about 3 times the rate of progress as students not using PracticePal. The big question for me is how much of that is down to actually they just weren't practicing before using PracticePal, and how much of that is down to the quality of what we're doing. I'd like to say there's a good bit of the quality there as well, but I think actually the majority is that by having that interaction, it means that they do practice. And in many ways, there's nothing wrong with the fact that the best thing that we're doing is we're getting them to have more contact time with their instrument. But that is making a huge impact, and they're enjoying it.
I'm guessing that a shared frustration both for the teacher and the parent is lack of practice or ineffective practice. I'm guessing this is a shared frustration because the parent they want their child to progress more, and obviously if they're investing in it, obviously let's talk a bit about more maybe this is not at the core of the technology itself, but let's talk a bit about the music itself and what music does to children. And I think this is important also for teachers who are listening to us, who are the academic teachers, not the music teachers, and maybe even the music teachers. You have a lot of understanding of what actually music does to a person who is studying it. So let's just say a few words about this. I think it's important information for people to have.
Yes, it's kind of my favorite subject. So thanks for teeing it up. Gives me a chance to tell everyone. The key takeaway is if you're going to remember anything, remember myelination, because then you can go away and Google it. But so myelination, what's that all about? So, okay, we've got to take this back to what do you want to be happening, if you like, in the brain of or to the children as they learn? So do you want to be increasing the amount of data that their brains are storing, or do you want to be increasing their brain's capacity for processing data? So kind of to put it really bluntly, like if you're going to compare it to a computer, it's sort of like RAM versus hard drive. So, or I guess RAM and processor speed
Yep.
versus hard drive. So do you want, huge RAM, amazing ability to process data at very high speeds, or do you just want lots of data storage? And as far as I'm concerned, I'm always going to choose the high speed computer over something with just a massive hard drive of audio files or whatever it is. And so if we take it back to myelination, what is it that happens in the brain that increases the speed at which we can process data? And that's myelination. So myelination is the process by which the brain deposits a kind of a fatty substance on the nerve connections between right and left hemispheres, which increases the electrical conductivity of those nerves. So, and this can be really built up layer by layer, very, very thickly and substantially, and it creates these kind of data superhighways in the brain. So if you think of going from kind of dial-up internet to super fast broadband, that's the kind of concept you should have when you're thinking about this.
Yep.
Now, we have generally in our brains, we only have a couple of these substantially myelinated pathways from our normal learning experience in life. The potentially some of the kind of outliers for that would be kind of in bilingual children, things like that. But by and large, we just have these kind of like one or two substantially myelinated pathways, and possibly those are kind of created through learning to walk and talk, things like that. Now, in education, one of the real questions I think is, how do you get to the point where you can increase, if you like, the number of these substantially myelinated pathways and the amount that they are myelinated? So you want to have more high-speed data transfer points in your brain is basically what you want to have for a higher IQ, a better functioning brain.
Yeah. And
so what is the activity which stimulates that above everything else? And time and again, it is coming out that instrumental music, or rather instrumental music practice, is far and above the one thing that can truly stimulate myelination and multiple myelinated pathways. Now, it becomes a bit more obvious if you think about it. So if you think of like sort of playing a violin or something like that, you've got your fine motor skills, your gross motor skills going on. You're reading a piece of music, a different language. You're then translating that into these movements. At the same time as taking, if you like, a kind of oral feedback loop. So you're listening to what's being produced. You're analyzing that sound simultaneously. All this is happening at the same time. You're analyzing that sound, going, is that the right timbre? Is that the right volume? Do I need to adjust the tuning? You're making those adjustments as you're doing it, at the same time as, still reading further along in the music. You're also engaging parts of your brain like emotion, and you might even be counting simultaneously because you want to know the rhythm. Is this 1 and 2 and 3 and a 4 and whatever? And it's so many different parts of the brain simultaneously that basically your brain cannot pass all of the data along your standard pathways. It needs to find those new pathways. So it starts to stimulate new pathways being myelinated. And then as you rehearse, repeat, they get myelinated, more and more myelinated, until you've kind of created these extra additional data superhighways. Now, it maybe at this point you're thinking, really? This sounds crazy. I'm not sure I quite believe this, musician. He's very biased. Well, the thing is, I can show you in an MRI scanner, and we can look at how big your corpus callosum is, and then we can work out a rough estimate of what that means you're likely to have done in terms of music practice as a child. Because if it's more than like 2 or 3 hours a week over the course of 3 years, then your corpus callosum is going to be 20% larger than someone who hasn't practiced music. And like that's it's not a small amount. It
Yeah.
really isn't.
Yeah.
And actually, in a lot of the studies, rather than treating this as a spectrum of like how much have you practiced, they've treated it as binary, and yet they've still seen. So by binary, I mean as in you've either learnt music or you haven't, rather than like did you practice, which is the crucial thing.
Yeah.
Even in those studies, you're still ending up seeing an impact which might equate to like an increase of 7 to 10 IQ points or percentage, which again, it's a huge increase. Like we're
Yeah.
not talking about small things. And yeah, so one of the things that I'm really keen to see is that we focus on the stuff which is going to help children learn to learn. Do we want them to learn, or do we want them to learn to learn? I love the learning to learn, because then you've set them up for life, haven't you? They can keep learning for the rest of their life. They can be enthusiasts about all the things that they want to get interested in and execute, because they've got that ability to learn and understand, to process and apply. And again, another interesting thing on this, you're going to have to tell me if I need to be quiet, but is that if you look at the difference in someone who's like working on a maths problem, who isn't a musician, who hasn't done a significant amount of music practice, if you look at brain imaging of what's being engaged in their brain while working on a maths puzzle versus someone who has learned a musical instrument, it's really interesting again, because it's very, very different picture. You've got one or two areas lighting up when you haven't learned a musical instrument. When you have, you've got multiple different areas of the brain which wouldn't normally be associated with mathematical reasoning, that the brain has like pulled in for help.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I'm gonna bring some extra processing power, and I've got these highways. I can easily pull in these bits that we wouldn't normally use, and I can process a whole load of data through there. It's quite incredible.
Yeah, and I think I don't know if this is a myth, but I've heard many times that there is a correlation between being good at music and math, and so I don't know if it's true or not, but it makes sense. And
Yeah,
I can relate to your story because
yeah.
my first instrument, which I started when I was 6 or 7, was the violin, and I now realize that I didn't really know what's going on. I didn't realize all of what you said was going on when I was practicing, and like most children, I didn't like practicing, and also what's interesting
Yeah.
is that I think many adults, including teachers, I think they look at the goal of playing a musical instrument is to play these pieces, or even play more difficult pieces. But what you are saying is I think, very important, because it's less important if they succeeded in getting, this difficult piece, in control, but rather what it took to get there, and what they went through,
Yeah.
regardless of what they achieved, the
Yeah.
actual practice itself.
Yeah.
So, which is where the big benefit is compared to, the badge. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what I think, if you're going to do a sort of metadata analysis, what seems to be the picture is that there is not correlation, causation of increase of quantity in music practice to an increase in myelination, to an increase in attainment across all subjects. So there kind of is a correlation between being good at maths and music, but there's also a correlation between being good at music and literally every other subject.
Yeah.
Because it increases your brain's capacity to learn and to adapt and to process new information.
And at what ages are we looking for?
So it's actually good for you whatever age. There's broadly, you broadly normally break down kind of 3 phases of myelination. I mean, actually, it's more like just a slow deterioration from birth, which then actually age 30, your brain pretty much stops kind of producing myelin of its own volition.
Okay.
And one of the only ways post 30 to stimulate myelination again is instrumental music practice. But you've got this really highly active point of your life where you're really able to kind of myelinate quite significantly, and that's sort of up to 7, and then you kind of think maybe 7 to 13 is sort of the next phase where it's a bit of a step down, but it's still hugely active. And then if you think of a kind of slow decline from 13 to 30, that kind of gives you a bit of a picture. And so yeah, one of the things that I'm fascinated by with is actually it looks like the attainment gap between those who come from disadvantaged backgrounds and those who are more affluent. It looks like that attainment gap is basically the same as, if you like, a myelination gap coming into school. So by the time they kind of start their education, they're already this step behind in terms of their brain's ability to process information. And so one of my questions, what I'd love to see is, like, if you tackle that with instrumental music practice really early on, and particularly target those from disadvantaged backgrounds, could you see that attainment gap close? Could you see it narrow?
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah,
because the evidence suggests you could, and it wouldn't even take that long.
yeah.
So I think that's one of the things that I would love to see, and I think could be a huge impact of what we're doing with supervised music practice. We're actually we're running a case study this year in a school in Birmingham, John Henry Newman Catholic College, and they've got a lot of children from who are pupil premium children, so who are coming from a poorer background, and yeah, so it's one of the things we want to start to understand more of. So we're providing guided practice for a cohort. I think it's about 30 or 40, so that we can start to understand this a little bit more. Can we see, even over the impact of 1-2 years, can we start to see that impact of supervised music practice helping close the attainment gap? So that'd be pretty interesting.
Yeah. Wow, that's very interesting. So if you look at the future of this ecosystem, where is this heading? Where are you seeing Practice Pal go next, and the role of it in the future, in your opinion?
Good question. Do I want to have in spoilers? Is that is that not a thing? Shouldn't I be worried? I don't want to give all of the fun away. I mean, there's some pretty cool things we're working on at the moment. So we're doing. I mean, it seems crazy, but it seems to be the case that no one has really tackled progress tracking in instrumental music before, or at least, if they have, they've tended to give up. But that's one of the things we're actually going to be releasing a feature in the next couple of months, which is, I think, going to be one of the most progressive and cool progress tracking features for this. So we're basically making it so that you can set the next, broadly speaking, the next level or grade you're working towards. So let's say you're working towards grade 3. Now you can set, as a teacher, you can set the components, the elements that are going to make up the distance from where you are now to, if you like, completing grade 3. And then you're going to be able to have an incremental percentage bar for each of those elements. So let's say you've got 3 pieces: scales, arpeggios, orals, sight reading, whatever it is. You've got all of those different elements. And then each week you can move the slider a little bit further along for each one of those different elements, and it will be amalgamated into one progress bar, so that a child and their parent and the teacher can understand, broadly speaking, how much progress are my students making? How faster we progressing, and then we'll be able to spot, for example, which students need more attention right now, which students are actually they're flying way faster than other people. That's something that needs to be celebrated, or we need to look for new opportunities for them, things like that. And
but
then
do you
there's also
that,
implications for.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Well, I was just saying there's implications for. We've
go
got that
ahead, go ahead.
Zoom, the typical Zoom scenario. Yeah, there's implications for schools where they can understand as well their, if you like, aggregated progress for instrumental music, and that can start to become really powerful, because you can then break that down by different categories. So English is an additional language, for example, or pupil premium background, or SEND. You can break those down and you can see actually how is the rate of progress comparing between those different subsets, and therefore what actions do we need to take as a result. And that is immensely powerful. That's one of the things that gets me quite excited. I think this is going to be a pretty cool step forward for us. So progress tracking, that's on its way, coming soon. You were going to ask a question. What was that, sir?
I was going to ask, is this something that isn't it natural for a teacher to kind of know where the student is, or where is the big impact for the teacher, in your opinion?
Well, we've asked a lot of teachers. So we've surveyed a lot of teachers. We've got a lot of data on what is currently going on in instrumental music lessons. And at the moment, all of this is basically, it's in the instrumental music teacher's head. And you're making a rough judgment, and you're relying on your own ability to think which students are progressing slower, which students need more attention, and so this is an opportunity essentially to do what most teachers want to do, which is to do that better. Now, many of the teachers we've talked to say actually they've tried to create spreadsheets to track this. They've tried lots of different systems. They've used like effort scores and like grade scores and things like that. And we didn't actually find any teachers who had tried and continued. They had all given up because they were like, actually, it just, in the end, it doesn't work. And that was why we wanted to say, well, look, let's try and make sure you have the tools to do what you want to do, because especially as a music teacher myself, I know how crucial this is. If I could have had a graph that showed me how all of my students were kind of doing in their progress, that would have been amazing. And so I want to make sure that teachers do have those tools, that they can see what it is that's going on. They can make sure they're doing the best that they can do, because the thing that is most rewarding for teachers, and that they tell us the whole time is most rewarding, is seeing their pupils flourish in making music. And so they want to see the most progress that their students are capable of achieving. That's the most rewarding thing for them and for the student.
I think until you mention it, and until you make a point of it, I didn't realize really how big this could be, because every other subject is being measured, and I'm not even I don't even mean in exams or tests. I mean, especially when you look at all the education technology that's being developed, a lot of it is for helping, let's say, math teachers to pinpoint where the student is struggling and so on. It makes so much sense over there, and it's kind of completely overlooked in music. So it's really amazing to step up and add that to the mix, because only once you add it, I think you can see how it's really missing. I can imagine that. Wow, that's great.
It's going to be fun. It's going to be really fun.
So that's wonderful. Now, I want to end with asking about, teachers who are listening to us. It could be the academic teachers as well as the music teachers, obviously. How do they find out about Practice Pal? What's the right path to get it started in a school even?
So, I mean, get in touch. The starting point is probably go to our website, practicepalmusic.com.
Okay,
And there's lots of ways to
practicepalmusic.com.
get in touch. And then there's lots of ways to get in touch on the website. You'll be able to find out more information for each of those different kind of roles as well. But the best way is booking in a time to chat. So we actually try and make it really easy for people to talk to us. We don't hide behind lots of automated bots that point you in the direction of unhelpful answers. You can actually directly from our website, you can book in slots to have a video call with us and talk about what we're doing and how the tech works. So that's the best way to do it, because we can then screen share. We can show you what's most relevant for you, understand your school setup, the needs you have. Each school is different, and that means that we can make sure that we show you the stuff that's most relevant to you.
And do you find that the first step is usually taken by the music teacher or by the school? What do you usually find?
It actually varies quite a lot. So I think the most common is a head of music. Most common is head of music.
Head of music, okay.
Then, yeah, probably the next most common first point of contact might be a data manager or an IT lead. Or we do actually have quite a lot of head teachers who get in touch themselves and say, actually, I hadn't been thinking about instrumental music. And then I asked our head of music how many peripatetic music teachers we have. And it turns out we have 18. And then I asked them, how many students do they teach? And they said, I don't know, because we don't have a way of collating all of that information.
Yeah.
So I'll have to look on their timetables. Give me an hour and I'll get back to you with a number. And then I said, how's everything going? And they weren't entirely sure. And so, actually, can I have a look at your software? Because I'd like to understand what's going on in the instrumental music department just as much as I'd like to understand what's going on in biology or maths or English.
Yeah. Which is again making use of the data that you collect. So that's very important. And for parents who just simply want their children to practice better and practice more, they can actually get your assistance with your practice mentors.
And you don't even have to be. So your school doesn't even have to be on board. It works. You can sign up again from the website. So practicepalmusic.com. If you go to the guided practice part on our website, then you'll find information and details about signing up for guided practice, and you'll be able to have regular slots with our mentors. And yes, you will see some amazing progress.
Wow. Ross, thank you so much. This is really exciting. And
well, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. And I encourage everyone to go to practicepalmusic.com and check it out and look at what's happening in your school, or for parents who have children who are practicing a musical instrument. It's great to know that these tools exist. I recently found out about you, and it's very, very excited. So thank you so much again.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited too. Excited to see what happens in music education.